Welcome back to another VMK in the game development series. In this video, I'll be showing you how to add mouse controls for your camera. So now with the mouse you'll be able to turn your virtual head left and right as well as up and down so that you can look around in the scene. And this will complement the previous VMK, which allowed you to move around using the keyboard. So now you'll be able to move and look at the same time. If you find my videos helpful and you'd like to support my website, please go to www.maticknows.com, and you can support my website by clicking on the PayPal icon to donate some money, or you can click on any of the Google ads found on the right side. So in the last video, we modified some of the code that allowed you to update the position of the camera class. Well, we need to modify this camera class slightly so that we can add an extra degree of freedom to the way that it works. So let's go into the camera class, and we're going to need to add an extra axis here that we can rotate about, because previously we could move the camera X, Y, Z, and we could only rotate it about the Y axis, so we could turn left and right. But now we also want to be able to add looking up and down. So looking up and down would be rotation about the x-axis, so we need a variable to store that. So that should do that trick. And we'll also need to get the x angle. So we'll do this. We can save that, and then let's go into the camera, initialize our x value, as well as we need to go and create that get y angle, or get x. Okay. And if I'm not, oh right. The other thing we're going to change here is just the wording here. Right now we're using move left, move right, move forward, move back, and we had turn left and turn right. Well, I'm going to rename this to be look left and look right, because then we're also going to now add look up and look down. Okay, now when we're going to be looking up and down, we don't need to update the look direction, since we're still going to be looking in the same direction. It's just going to be up or down slightly. So we're going to leave that, but we are going to update this. Okay, the other thing we need to do here is we need to give a limit as to how far we can look up and how far we can look down. So to do that, we're just going to add this piece of code here. So what this says is, if we go and change the value for x and it's greater than 0.5, then we're going to just saturate it to 0.5. So we're not going to let you look higher than 0.5 radians upward. And same thing with looking down. We can't look less than 0.5 radians down, because we just saturate it. And 0.5 radians works out to be about 29 degrees. So I'll just type that in here. Now the way that the code is structured is, we're not actually going to be using this case here. Everything's going to work from the lookup case. So that's why we actually have both checks here for the positive and negative. Normally, if we'd be just using the up, we'd be just putting this in, and then in the down case we'd just put this in. But I put both into the up and both into the down, just so that the code will work for us. Okay, let's try to compile the camera class, make sure we didn't make any mistakes. Oh, and we did. Okay, yeah, look up and look down haven't been defined yet in the core. We need to go and rename it here as well. And we need to add the look up and the look down. Okay, let's try to build that. Okay, so the camera class is now ready. And we can close that off. Okay, so now we just have to make some modification to the OpenGL code. Just like we did with the keyboard, we're also going to add a new function call. Right here. Before we had handle keyboard, we're going to add a new function call here called handle mouse, and that's going to handle which way we're going to be looking. So we'll save that, and then we need to go and add that handle mouse into the frame as well. So here's frame, and let's just put it underneath the keyboard, handle mouse. And now let's go actually program the code for handle mouse. Okay, so with handle mouse, we create 3 static variables here, 2 integers and a float. So the integers are going to hold the mouse position, and the floating point value here is going to hold a scaling factor. Now the way that this initialization works here is iMouse X and iMouse Y stores the current position of the mouse in the X and Y direction. Now initially we need to set it to something because we do a subtraction here, so it needs a value before it runs through. So I give it a value that's equal to the width of the screen divided by 2. This operation here means divide by 2. The way that it's interpreted means that this is a shift, so it's taking the integer value here and it's shifting all the numbers by 1 bit to the right, which means actually division by 2. Same thing with the Y. So we're taking the width and height of the screen, dividing them by 2, and setting the mouse position there. So in other words, we're putting it into the middle of the screen. We have a scaling factor here, which is used just to scale this difference here so that we can determine how quickly we've moved. Notice that in this move call, normally we would pass a direction and a delta time, but we're not passing a delta time. Instead, we're passing a difference between the current mouse position and the previous mouse position, and then scaling by the scale factor. So this, in other words, is going to act the same sort of way that the delta time acts when we use the keyboard. So we see here we get the mouse position, and then we move the camera to the right based on this scaling factor, and then we move the camera upward based on this scaling factor. So we move it to the right whenever we change the x coordinate of the mouse, so we move left or right. With the mouse, we find how far we've moved left and right, scale it, and that's how much we offset the camera by. And then for looking up, we figure out how far we've moved the mouse in the vertical direction, scale it by some factor, and then we say move the camera by that value. Okay, let's see what happens when we try this. Oh, we got a problem. Let's see. Alright, we got to go back here and rename this now to look, and this one here to look. Okay, so we notice we're getting some pretty crazy spinning because I'm trying to stabilize it in the middle of the screen, but no matter how far I move left or right, it just starts moving really quickly, and up and down doesn't seem to be working. Okay, to stop running the program, you just press Alt space, and then the window will pop up, and we can use our arrow to hit close, or you can press Alt F4 as well to close the window. So what was happening there is we're moving, but we're moving based on the difference from the center position, which is defined here, and the current position. So to prevent that rapid motion, after we do all this update here, we need to then reset the mouse position to be back at the center of the screen. And we can do that with the following call. So we set the cursor position to iMouse X and iMouse Y. So again, that's the middle of the screen. Well, let's try this and see what happens now. Okay, So now we've got this nice smooth motion, left and right, but still up and down isn't working. So let's take a look to see what's messed up with up and down. Alright, we're telling the camera here to move right and move up and down. However, we didn't actually change our code to take the position of the up and down. So go into render pre, and down here notice that we first rotate the camera along the y-axis, but we don't do anything with the x-axis. Well, let's change that. Let's just put this in here. So now we get the x-axis angle, and we rotate by that much along the x-axis here, and then we get the y angle and we rotate that about the y. So this part here is going to move our virtual head up and down, and this one here is going to move our head left and right whenever we move the mouse. So let's go and build this and try running it. Okay, so now I can move up and down, left and right, and keyboard is still working, so that's good. And let me just test here the limits. If I go up to a triangle really close and then look up, we see I can't look down beyond here, and there's a certain limit. I can't look any higher up. Now the other thing you'll notice is that my mouse cursor is in the middle of the screen here, and it's visible, which is kind of undesirable because you don't want this mouse cursor jumping around so much. So eventually what you want to do is disable the default Windows mouse cursor and replace it with like your own crosshairs or whatever, which you'll render based on the way you're positioning your own eye in the 3D scene. So let's just go ahead and get rid of the default mouse. Again, to exit the window, just press Alt F4. And we can get rid of the mouse by calling a certain function, and we can put it into the, let's put it into the initialize. Since the initialize only gets called once, then right at the bottom here we can disable the mouse. So the other thing we'll want to do here is take the cursor and put it into the middle screen, just to make sure that initially it's at the middle of the screen. So again, we take the width of the screen divided by 2, that's the x-coordinate, take the height of the screen divided by 2, and that's the y-coordinate. So we're going to put the cursor in the middle of the screen, and then we're going to hide the cursor. Now, before you run this though, you should go and make sure you show the cursor when you're done. So under cleanup, so after your program has decided to exit, we can then show the cursor. So we'll just add that code there. Let's build and give it a try. Okay, so now we don't no longer see our cursor on the screen, and we can move around. We got motion with both the mouse and the keyboard. And to exit, again, Alt F4. And you can add in other commands now. Now that you know how to work with the keyboard, you can go ahead and under handle keyboard here, you can do something along the lines of, if a certain key is pressed, then quit your game, or maybe bring up a menu that says, do you want to quit, or something like that. So you can program in the logic into handle keyboard. One last thing I want to add here is, if you do want to handle mouse button clicks, or using the scroll wheel for instance, you should handle this message from Windows, WM_mouse move. And if you look at the W param, you can see whether mouse buttons have been pressed, which mouse buttons have been pressed, and then there's another command here, mouse wheel, which you can use to determine whether the user is using the mouse wheel to move back and forth and things like that. So that can all be handled here. So that's how you add mouse controls into your game engine.